Well, here in Berlin, a big protest on Saturday against pandemic restrictions has ignited a debate about the limits that can be placed on the right to public assembly. The German Minister for Justice has affirmed that right, while at the same time insisting that rules like wearing masks must be observed. Now, most of the 20,000 people taking part in the protest did not follow guidelines, which led to a number of arrests.
Saturday's protest in Berlin against the rules to fight the coronavirus. Demonstrators failed to keep their distance from each other, and they didn't wear masks either. Politicians are outraged. On the one hand, they're exercising their right to protest, but there are rules, which they disregard. Their behavior is playing with people's lives. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. There's the freedom to exercise one's right to demonstrate, but also a responsibility to abide by the rules. Instead of a relaxation of the restrictions, the Bavarian state premier, Markus Söder, would rather see a tougher enforcement by authorities to fight the virus. People who come from risk areas and don't take a coronavirus test or refuse to take one, along with those who deliberately violate the measures, must face a fine. Otherwise, all of this makes little sense. As infections rise in Germany, the best way to deal with the pandemic looks set to cause further debate.
That debate very much in the headlines this morning. I'm joined now by our political correspondent, Emmanuel Shays. Good morning, Emmanuel. Observers were very surprised, taken back by the size of this demonstration and about who was there.
Well, in fact, people came from all over the country to that protest on Saturday. 20,000 people, you said it. There's a mix of reasons for them to be there. You could find anti-vaxxers who really worry about possible obligatory vaccine once and if a vaccine is found. You also had conspiracy theorists, you had representatives of the far-right movements and of the neo-Nazi movements as well, but you also had people everyday people who worried that their fundamental rights were being trampled on because of the measures being taken to try and tackle the pandemic. Now, you also had signs that likened wearing a mask to wearing a yellow star during World War II, or, for example, there was a banner showing, calling that the Tag der Freiheit, which means the Day of Freedom, except that this name is actually the name of a Nazi propaganda film by Leni Riefenstahl. So those signs were problematic as well. People were calling for Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, for Christian Drosten, who's the main virologist and the one who became quite famous during that pandemic, for Jens Spahn to be locked up. So we see a sea of angry people who demonstrated on Saturday in Berlin.
Okay, the politicians were very quick to respond to this, especially considering the size of the demonstration. What were they saying?
Well, Jens Spahn, for example, the health minister, say that, of course, people have a right to protest. That's not put in question. However, if they do so without respecting social distancing, without wearing masks, then they endanger other people. I've covered, for example, the Black Lives Matter all throughout June here in Berlin, and there was also the question of how safe it was. But, for example, when there was the biggest protest, which gathered 15,000 people, everybody was wearing a mask. So we really see two sides of German society that are clashing at the moment.
Okay, not only clashing, this one part of German society clearly rejecting guidelines that we've been following since March.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's somehow a lack of trust for one part of the German society towards the government and its handling of the crisis. There's also signs of impatience, and perhaps it's more difficult to understand here in Germany because the country hasn't been hit so hard by the pandemic, not as hard as Spain, not as hard as France or Italy, for example. And all things considered, here in Germany, we had a very mild lockdown. We're still able to go out. We're still able to do a lot of things that other countries couldn't, yet a lot of people feel that their fundamental freedoms are being threatened.
Okay, not as severe as a lot of places like Spain or France, the lockdowns here. Schools reopening today in the German state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, other schools and other states set to follow. What are the guidelines for school reopenings?
Well, today in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, there's 150,000 children which will go back to school. The plan is to make it as normal as possible, given the circumstances. They will have 4 to 5 teaching hours per day, including music classes, sports classes as well. Wearing a mask won't be compulsory, but children will be asked to respect social distancing and, when not possible, not to touch each other in any case. And also, school years will be divided so as to allow for one class or one school year to be quarantined if there's an infection, but so as not to affect the whole school.
Okay, so localizing also any possible lockdowns moving forward. Emmanuel, thanks so much for coming in on this today.
Thank you.